I feel that today's monologue is very important. You may disagree, and it's only an opinion. I was watching with the lovely Julia the other night a film, a Hollywood film that came out in 1976 with Dustin Hoffman and Laurence Olivier. Now, you may have already guessed it just by me saying those two names and putting them together and thinking, well, what film came out? Of course, I'm talking about Marathon Man. It was a classic of its time, and I quote a little bit in the book that I'm writing, and Julia wasn't familiar with this, so I said, well, let's just watch it, and then you'll be more familiar with the film. And of course there's some iconic moments in that film. Towards the end of the film, there's a particular moment that just rang a little bell with me, and I thought this is a good talking point for today's video, and I think it's actually quite important that we understand this. The film is a sort of, I suppose, a bit of a diamond smuggling film in which Laurence Olivier plays an ex-German prisoner of war, nasty, a Nazi, and it's several years later after the war, and he's come back to America to collect some diamonds for whatever reason. And Dustin Hoffman plays a student who's embroiled in this by mistake, really, through family ties. Anyway, the plot at this stage is not really relevant. It's a great film, and it's well made and well acted. There's a moment in the film where this ex-Nazi Laurence Olivier character is trying to find out the value of diamonds, to know how much his stash of diamonds is worth. And he goes into a diamond area in, I think it's in New York, and he's trying to find out what the value of certain sized diamonds will be, to realise what a fortune he's got. Well, and in doing so, he's recognised by an ex-intern of a prisoner of war camp. And Laurence Olivier realises that he is this ex-prisoner of war because he has a tattoo that they used to do in the prisoner of wars on his wrist. And as I saw that, I suddenly thought, yes, he's been marked, hasn't he? And he's got that for the rest of his life unless he can get rid of it. And then I realised this is exactly what a digital ID will do for us. It's exactly the same. It will mark us permanently. The digital ID is this thing that's being pushed, as we all know, and it's absolutely imperative that we do not have this unless we want to be trapped in a system in which, like a prisoner of war, we become unable to escape. For if you attach a name and a number together, along with biometrics, you have a system in which you can be identified anywhere. We know the technology is being put out into the environment, that the cameras and the 5G system is there to ensure that people can know exactly where we are at any one time. Now, to a degree, we're already being spied on and surveilled with our mobile phones, with our Alexas and our other mechanisms that we've put into our house, with probably our computers and laptops which are taking pictures of us and spying us and listening to us. We carry these devices in us with microphones that are listening to everything we say. So to a certain degree, we've already allowed that. And of course, we've volunteered a lot of data about ourselves on social media like Facebook, giving away pictures of everything we do, everything we have in our house, everything that we wear, everything that we buy, our children. We share that information thinking that we're actually getting something out of it for free, but actually it's that data that is being taken away and listened to and looked at and studied and used and sold. But the digital ID is just that one step of actually placing us now inside a concentration camp, inside a prison in which we cannot escape. And this is because as soon as you have a digital ID, a number that's tagged with your name and then later with face recognition technology, you can be identified. You see, at the moment, we are relatively free. We don't think that we're free, but we are relatively free because although we have bills and although we have tax demands, they all come to a name that was registered at our birth. But it's not us, it's just a piece of paper. Now, I've spoken about this many times on how the birth certificate itself cannot prove that you exist. It just simply records an event, a birth of somebody. But the name, and we know the name comes to us in capital letters all the time, is just a name that's been registered in this country by the Crown Corporation. It's not actually referring to us, but we're told that it is. We accept that name. We're trained to keep that name. When we go to school, we are called by that name, particularly the surname and the forename attached. And in work, we are having to be a Mr. Joe Bloggs, whatever it might be, and we say, yes, that's me. And all the time we say that that name is us. But we're not a name. Of course, we are what? Some sort of consciousness, some awareness, a soul, a spirit, I don't know what, in a body. That's all we can do. And it's very difficult for any authority to actually identify us, because I would say to them, if I had a bailiff knocking on the door or a taxman demanding money from me, and he's saying, are you Mr. Vobes, or whatever he wants to call me, I would say, well, no. And he would say, well, you are. And I'd say, prove it. How can they prove who you are unless you tell them who you are? Unless you open the door, Mr. Vobes, yes. You've then just jumped into their jurisdiction. If you tell them who you are, you have admitted, you've acquiesced to their jurisdiction, a jurisdiction of legislation, of acts and statutes. But if you do not admit to being the name, it's very difficult for them to prove it. They can't prove it. How do they prove that you are who they think you are? But with a digital ID, once they've tallied up your face, your biometrics, your fingerprint, your blood, your DNA to a number, which is now stored on a computer in government, and they can track everything you do, they can now start to tag you, or, in the earlier example, effectively put a tattoo on you that is unmovable. This is why, in my opinion, it's absolutely essential that we do not go down this road. And even though the government are likely to push this and say it's for our benefit, it would be absolutely ill-advised of anybody, I believe, in my opinion, and you can make your own decision, to have and accept a digital ID. Now, the chances are that they're already doing this behind our backs, that they're already attaching our faces to a number and our name. But we still have the freedom of saying, prove it. Unless we acquiesce, unless we admit, unless we say yes, they still cannot prove who we are. The problem that we have, of course, is the system is all set up for this corporate name, this commerce name that we think, on the whole, that we are, that we're not. And so if you say, no, I'm not that name, the possibility, of course, is that the usefulness of that name, your bank account, which is in the corporate name, your utility bills, your council tax, your driver's license, your passport, none of that belongs to you anyway. In some ways, I would argue if you've got a utility bill or a tax demand, you send it back to the Crown Corporation and say, I don't think this is aimed at me. This has got your copyrighted name on it. You created this character. I don't know who it is. Send it back to the Crown. I think that bill is for you, not for me, because I'm not who you say you are. The digital ID, it will imprison us beyond measure. And I would urge people to think twice about accepting it. And I would suggest it is worth pushing back as much as we can. The problem is we carry our phones, which we become so reliant on, and it does everything for us. It seems that the digital age, while it has huge benefits, look at me, I'm using a digital contraption in order to quickly put up a video on YouTube so that you can watch it on your digital contraption. However, it does seem that it is an incredibly useful device for those people who wish to control us. And therefore, in many ways, I urge us to return to a much more analog world, which is far harder for them to control us and far difficult to have any kind of digital database with our data on it if we don't have it. It's just an opinion, and I'd be interested in your thoughts.